it seems like it has the potential to be really impressive. Bob's deck is the first one that is really all in on this new card. 4 is a huge number for a spell like this.
Oh yeah, Bob's not messing around. And as I was looking at deck lists, kind of walking down the rows, you would see a Treasure Cruise being cast on occasion. You would see a Dig Through Time being cast on occasion. There are a lot of players who have added 1, maybe 2 copies of 1 or 2 of those. But Bob's is the only list out there, at least that I have spotted, that is just going full blown. I'm a delve deck.
Absolutely. So we are underway. Bob's on the play. We're going to get to see just how explosive this deck can be. 12 creatures. You have your Delvers, your Young Pyromancers, and your Monastery Swift Spears.
And fetching up an island, so we're not going to see the Monastery Swift Spear in action this turn. Just
not yet.
Yeah, the usual suspect.
Delver of Secrets. Now, to be fair, it has haste, so if you have both, he probably comes down on the second turn.
Okay, that's fair. That is true.
See Delver of Secrets. It is backed up by Daze's Force of Will and Treasure Cruise.
You know what I love? There's been a bit of a hubbub about deck naming conventions. I love that with this deck, are we talking about, is it Delver because there's Delver of Secrets, or is it Delver because we're delving with Treasure Cruise?
Delver of Secrets. Oh, man.
But shot. We're double dipping.
Oh,
I
wow.
love it.
All right. He doesn't even delve. What's misnamed?
Yeah, flavor fail on Wizard's part.
And we're over on Shiels' side. You see, he's got a hand that's set for a long game grind. Brainstorm, multiple Shardless Agents, a Tarmogoyf, a Hymn to Turok, but one that could be pretty susceptible to a fast draw like the one Bob's going to present.
Yeah, for sure. And that's traditionally been one of the edges of these blue-red Delver decks, is that they punish the grind. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Dave Shiels does not have access to Daze. He does not necessarily have access to quick clocks. I mean, he has Tarmogoyf, but that's basically what you're working with.
Yeah. Dave fetched a Tropical Island on his turn, playing around a potential Stifle, while Bob's Insectile Aberration flipped off a Jataxian Probe. And it was a blind flip. He'll now get to see what he's playing against as he casts the Jataxian Probe. Mm-hmm. And we see it here. As we said before, it's a Hymn to Turok, a Tarmogoyf, and 2 Shardless Agents to accompany Brainstorm and lands number 2/3. It's a good curve on Dave's side, but it's pretty slow.
Yeah. I mean, it's a blocker in theory, not for Delver, but it would have been a good blocker against Monastery Swift Spear in the form of Tarmogoyf. He has the interaction in the form of him, but no way to interact on the stack, no way to interact in terms of removing a threat from play. So Bob's basically getting the green light here.
Yeah, no second land for Bob. He's going to swing for 3. Dave drops to 16. And yeah, with multiple Dazes in his hand, it may be a while before Shiels resolves any spell that actually affects the board or stops this Insectile Aberration.
Luckily, with Bob missing land drops, he is going to get a little bit of time to get his feet stable. Bob's mana base he has 17 lands. Now that's a number that you might be tempted to compare to the rug or the teamer list that play 18, but usually of those 18, 4 are Wasteland, which don't really function as lands.
Yeah, because Bob's entire deck is 1-drops, with the exception of the Pyromancers, colorless mana is really something he's not in the market for, so he's taken out the Wasteland package altogether.
Yeah, 7 lands that produce mana, 2 island, 1 mountain, 4 volcanic islands, and then 10 fetch lands. So he is going to be able to use his cantrips, one supposes, to make those land drops, but he's going to need to do that rather than interact here.
All right, well, we'll see what Dave's going to do here. He fetches a second land. That one's Underground Sea. He's going to get his first chance at a spell. Bob, however, has just 1 land in play, and it looks like a trio of Dazes. So I'd have to imagine whatever spell Shiels goes for here is going to get hit with a Daze.
One would suspect, and
it's Tarmogoyf.
Yeah. Bob wastes no time. That is a faster clock even than the Delver. So
what I would be interested in this match is seeing how long it takes Bob to fill up the graveyard here. You see, he just has the 1 land, so he's a little slow on it. Mm-hmm. Puts Dave down to 12 with the Delver of Secrets. But especially where he's fetching lands and casting some other spells, I would imagine he's dumping 2 to 3 cards a turn.
That would be the idea. Certainly any turn in which you crack a fetch land and then play a spell, you're dumping 2. If you get to play a free spell like Force of Will or Gataxian Probe and cast a spell, you're dumping 2. But
Shardless Agent is the play for Shiels. He's going to Cascade. Looks like it's a Cascade into Tarmogoyf. Huang's going to counter one of these, maybe both. I imagine one. He has a Daze and Force of Will in hand.
He can counter both, and this feels like a spot where you should use it while you can.
pays a mana, floats a mana, casts Daze. We'll see which one that's targeting.
Yeah, every turn that you keep Dave Shiels from actually having a creature in his untapped step that he can actually start attacking with is huge for Bob.
Yeah, looks like he let him keep the Shardless Agent, basically because that's just a 2/2.
Yeah,
it's
sure.
not doing too much. He knocks Shields down to 9, and still no more land. He's going to pass back. Toxic Deluge now in Dave's hand, but with this Force of Will and a third Daze, Bob may just be able to ride Insectile Aberration all the way.
Sure, I mean, that's a reasonable plan. When he last saw Dave's hand, Dave had no answer to it. The interesting part of the equation in terms of like should you use the Force of Will and on what is that a Force of Will in hand is not a Force of Will in the graveyard that can be exiled to cast Treasure Cruise.
Exactly. Right now he's got 4 cards in his graveyard, so Treasure Cruise is still costing 4. But
right.
He's got to work his way
So
there.
if he had used Force, he would have 5, and then if he had drawn a fetch land, that lets him cast the Treasure Cruise.
All right, so he could have done it next turn off a fetch land.
Sure. Now, and that's, you're drawing it up one way. I don't even know if casting Treasure Cruise here is like the hoop you're trying to jump through. Obviously it's good. 3 cards are better than 0, but I don't know if that's necessarily plan A.
Yeah, we will see.
I feel like it would be.
Shields repeats last turn's play. He cast Shardless Agent. It cascaded into Tarmogoyf. Huang's got to be pretty happy he didn't cascade into an Abrupt Decay with either of these. The Goyf's going to hit the Force of Will in Bob's hand, exiling a second copy of Treasure Cruise.
Sure. Yeah, and having said all that, certainly there is some merit to the traditional school of thought to show just a little bit of discipline and not just force the first spell that enters the stack. I haven't cast a Treasure Cruise yet. I don't know how this card works, but I don't know if it's something that you have to prioritize casting above all else, or if it's just kind of there to jump you once you run out of gas. My instinct when there are 4 of them is that it's a card you expect to cast early and often, but Bob's kind of holding back a little, I feel, with it.
Yeah, 5 cards in the yard right now. He's going to cast Brainstorm here. He's hoping to find a second land. Finds Flooded Strand, Volcanic Island, and second Monastery Swift Spear. A lot of action here. He can dump card number 7 and Treasure Cruise now. My guess is he'll just Monastery Swift Spear instead. Well, he could, but actually I'm gonna hold up on that because there's a 2/2 blocker. Maybe that guy's not so good.
An interaction I really like here is if he plays Volcanic Island and Swift Spear and then leaves it back, he then gets to Daze and have a blocker that holds off the Shardless Agents, assuming Shields gives him a target for Daze pre-combat.
Interesting play indeed, yeah. The Treasure Cruise left in his hand is going to be castable for 1 when he decides to do it.
Okay.
See, he's going to crack a fetch. I believe he put his second Swift Spear away. He opted to keep 1 but not the other.
Okay.
See, Volcanic Island.
And you're only going to have access to the 1 red source anyway, unless he kept the... I know he had a Volcanic in his hand. Did he keep that one? No, he put it back in
just
fetch.
the 1.
Okay.
And actually, instead of Swift Spear, he's going to delve away his entire yard and draw 3.
Okay. I'm never going to say that drawing 3 cards is the wrong play.
No, Ancestral Recall is a good card no matter how you cut it and no matter when you play it.
Whether or not it cost 8.
Draws Lightning Bolt, Scalding Tarn, Lightning Bolt. Goodness. Well, he's going to hit Dave down to 6 this turn. That draw, second red source and pair of Lightning Bolts seems okay now.
Not bad. We mentioned Bob's deck full of burn. He didn't really have access to any before that, but he now has lethal in his hand.
And Shields drawing that Abrupt Decay. May think he's safe here. One thing that I want to note is if Bob just double bolts Shields, he can win without showing Monastery Swift Spear.
That is true, but I don't know that showing Monastery Swift Spear actually tips your hand any more than you already have. Yep. Maybe you have Monastery Swift Spear. Maybe you are playing Goblin Guide like these decks traditionally have. They're different cards, but they're not functionally so different that it's important to keep that information secret, and the jig's up now anyway.
Dave's going to Thought Season. So we see a pair of Swift Spears, a pair of Bolts, a Daze, and a Fetch Land. Dave goes to 4 for this one. He's got to know that he's in a tight spot. He does have the Abrupt Decay, however, for the Insectile Aberration. So at the moment, he's going to have to take a Bolt.
He's still dead to the burn he sees. This is the bad news Thought Sees, I think. Oh, well, I guess he can. Sure, he takes one Bolt.
Now, I want to back up here. If Bob had Dazed right there, Dave could not both Abrupt Decay the Insectile Aberration.
Sure.
He'd have to crack the Fetch.
And that would
put him to 3.
Okay. That's that's a very, very sophisticated play there, particularly given that Shiels has been taking 3 a turn from this insectile aberration from turn 2.
Right.
I think if you're Bob, it's pretty safe to assume that if Dave had an Abrupt Decay, he would have used it long before now.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those plays where you'd say, well, my Daze is almost certainly dead anyway. Why don't we just throw it out there? But Dave's going to get to play this Abrupt Decay then, and not necessarily be dead to the Lightning Bolt in Bob's hand.
Sure.
He's going to go to 1.
He's not dead to the Bolt. One side effect here is that he can't attack with his Shardless agents, because if he attacks with the agents, he is dead to the Monastery Swift Spears, which he now knows about.
But Bob doesn't have lethal just as of yet. See Monastery Swift Spear. It's going to be a play from Bob.
Okay, and so here's what I want to know. Do you crash in with the Swift Spear, assuming of course you're going to cast Bolt, and offer to trade with 1 Shardless agent?
We'll see here. He plays Swift Spear, just swings with Delver. That's going to get Abrupt Decayed.
So there's your answer. No, you do not. And this sets him up to cast his 2nd Swift Spear.
If he had a 4th land, he could have played both Swift Spears, then bolted Dave, dazed his own Lightning Bolt, and paid for it to make both his guys 2/3s and kill both Shardless agents.
Okay. It would have been solid. Would have needed to have been making those land drops earlier, which of course required a treasure cruise to get going. One interesting thing to note here, we see, I believe that's 4 cards in the graveyard up top.
It's 4, you're right. He's building up toward the next cruise.
Yeah, we have 4 there. We have another fetch land in hand. We have an easily castable Bolt and easily castable Daze. We just added 2 more thanks to the Simdich Rock.
Well, Bob doesn't want the Lightning Bolt to get snagged, so he's going to go ahead and put Shields down to 1. He's going to get to keep 1 of these cards. They are Daze, Land, Swift Spear. Swift Spear, probably the best one. And he gets to keep, looks like a red card's in the bin, so it's not that.
I believe he kept the Daze. And so Shields now at 1. Those 2 fetch lands, completely useless.
All right, so we have a Chain Lightning and one Chain Lightning, 2 remaining Lightning Bolts, 2 Forked Bolts. That's the burn.
Right. With this attack, another Swift Spear will do it. Bob kind of looked like he was motioning to... Whoa.
Dave attacked, and Bob just blocked. Dave forgot about the prowess ability, and the Bolt just made his Swift Spear 2/3.
Forgot, as did I, actually. I was like, you're going to chump block here? That doesn't sound right. Not a chump block. Bob knows what's up.
And now that there's only 1 Shardless, it's actually a lot worse for Dave, because if Bob draws any spell at all, he can cast it and daze his own spell and swing with a 2/3, forcing a chump block out of Shields.
It doesn't even need to, even if he draws something that doesn't trigger prowess, sure, like draws another Delver, for example.
So he has like Young Pyromancer, for example, he drew this turn. And I think what he wants to do is play his Young Pyromancer and daze his own spell.
Okay. Yeah, I'm on board. That kind of forces the Edict and leaves Bob with just 2 creatures. Of course, if he plays it out like that, the daze will not trigger the Young Pyromancer. But looks like he's content to just hold off for now.
Yeah, I mean, it's still not that bad it played this way, because eventually Shields is going to have to cast something, and when he does, he'll get, Bob can daze it. So he still gets a 1/1 this way. And as you see, Dave with no answer to either line.
Sure, and honestly, having 2 creatures against Dave's 1 blocker versus having 1 creature against Dave's no blockers.
It'd be 2. You'd pay for the Young Pyro.
Okay, sure.
You'd resolve. You just daze it.
Okay. Oh, yeah, that's fair. Either way, Bob was in very, very strong position and was able to pull it out.
All right, 1-0. Bob Huang up on Dave Shields. We'll move to the sideboard. Against a deck that's so low to the ground, I'm imagining Dave's going to board in all the cheap cards he can.
So let's see what he has access to. Traditionally, these decks have had a very scattered sideboard, just a lot of 1-ofs and 2-ofs, just kind of tweak your main game plan, nothing really game-changing. Dave has access to 1 Thoughtseize, 1 Hymn to Turok, 2 Disfigure, those are huge. 2 Flusterstorm, 1 Toxic Deluge, 2 Golgari Charm, 2 Nile Spellbomb, 1 Force of Will, 1 Knight of Soul's Betrayal, and 2 Chill. This is a tough spot for Dave because there are a lot of cards that I think are reasonable, but I don't think you can afford to bring them all in.
Yeah, well, you might want to start with what are the cards that he really can't afford to play. And when you look at that, you see cards like Jace the Mind Sculptor, Hymn to Turok. Those are things in his main deck that he really would like to get away from.
Sure.
Some cards are easy to board in. Say Disfigure, that's going to be a pretty easy one here. Outside of that, things start getting a little trickier. You know, do you want a Golgari Charm? It can kill the Young Pyro part of the deck at the very least, but it's not very good against the other things.
Well, I think having Golgari Charm as a way to reset the board against a Young Pyromancer that has already gotten loose and sort of gotten out of control is enough to justify bringing in Golgari Charm. You can also get pre-flip Delver of Secrets too.
Yeah.
But that's a bit of a stretch. You have to have it at the right time. Toxic Deluge does that same work in addition to actually being an answer to everything else.
Yeah, imagine we'll see Toxic Deluge. What about Nile Spellbomb? Bob did cast a 1-mana Treasure Cruise game 1.
Yeah, this is such a tough spot for me. My instinct is not to bother with the spell bombs.
If you're boarding in spell bombs against every deck that could be delving into one of these cards, it seems like, I don't know, that's hard.
Yeah. Ideally, you want spell bomb. Of course, you want it against things like Dredge that are completely all in on their graveyard, and you are pretty happy to have it in spots where you can get a player to commit to a play using the graveyard, whether it be getting a Tarmogoyf involved in combat or casting Snapcaster Mage and targeting a creature in the graveyard, and then you pull the trigger on the spell bomb to get some like for sure value out of it. Now in this case, when do you use it? You can't respond to the delve.
You'd have to value it. You'd have to do something like, oh, Bob's fetching and has 4 cards in his yard. That fetch land sure is the 5th. Better spell bomb right now.
Sure.
You'd have to do it at some point like that, which that doesn't feel great.
Yeah, you have to constantly be monitoring the graveyard, asking yourself, is the Treasure Cruise worth it now? Is it more than worth it now? Would it be kind of a stretch now? What happens if he plays any card ever? Like what now?
Right. It may just be better to thought seize the Treasure Cruise in the first place.
Yeah, if you're wanting to fight over Treasure Cruise specifically, just looking at Dave's sideboard, I think I would rather bring in Flusterstorm than now Spellbomb, for example. And I don't even want Flusterstorm. I think you're much better off fighting on the stack than you are against the graveyard. Of course, for those watching that don't actually know the interaction, you cannot respond to someone casting a spell with Delve to remove the graveyard and prevent them from delving.
Yeah, that's like, it's declaring a mana cost. It'd be like if I were trying to cast a spell regularly and you said, wait, in response to your spell, I bounce your land. I'm like, no, once I'm playing it, it's already there.
Right.
Doesn't matter how I'm paying.
Yeah, so I'm not excited about Nile Spellbomb here. I'm a little intrigued to see what Bob's going to be up to here.
Yeah, well, his sideboard's got a fair number of hate cards. It looks a lot like a burn sideboard, to be honest. He does have some things like Grim Lavamancer, Pyroblast available on his board, but I don't think he'll be using too many of them. The main cards I would want to look at would be Sulfuric Vortex and Blood Moon, each of which is a 2-of in his deck. Yeah,
and Blood Moon, of course, at its strongest, I want to say, against these style of decks.
Yeah,
so
Shiels actually is running more basics than average by running 1 Swamp.
Yeah, the Shardless decks traditionally don't play any. You might occasionally find somebody who is worried about Blood Moon in particular. And that's the reason I think Blood Moon. So, yeah, I think it is an easy decision for Bob to move to those. This is basically why they're here. Sulfuric Vortex is a little more interesting. On its face, it does not interact in any specific way with Dave, except by just being a generically useful clock that can't be dealt with using creature removal.
Yeah, it can get hit by Abrupt Decay.
Right, which is actually the most prominent removal spell in Dave's deck.
Right, so maybe those stay in the board. To be fair, Bob's main deck is pretty well situated here. His 12 creatures are all very good, and I can't imagine he'd want to board them out. And when you look at his spells, there's nothing that really sticks out as weak here. Maybe 2 copies of Forked Bolt, but most of the other cards are things that Bob would want.
No, and looking at Bob's list, again, his main deck in particular, this is a very well-oiled machine in the sense that there aren't cards, like for example, we looked at Dave's list and we said, well, this is not a matchup where Jace does much of anything. Get those out of here. This is not a matchup where you want him to Turok. But there aren't matchups, period, where Bob doesn't want Delver of Secrets, where Bob doesn't want Lightning Bolt, where Bob doesn't want Gitaxian Probe,
Yeah.
There aren't really any cards that stand out to me as like something that like, well, these are the obvious first card we take out anywhere, honestly. The closest thing might actually be Treasure Cruise.
Yeah, but it's hard to If you think Treasure Cruise is good in your deck,
And
you built a deck that's good for Treasure Cruise,
I certainly think Bob does think that, and
Yeah.
I think that too.
it is hard to make an argument to start boarding this 1-mana draw 3 out.
To an extent. There are other examples. For example, there are Delver decks where in certain matchups it just doesn't make sense to keep the Delvers,
Sure.
even though Delver is one of the best cards in your deck. I certainly think there could be matchups where you would board out Treasure Cruise here. I don't love Treasure Cruise against, say, Storm or Dredge, or like it's just like
A combo deck,
hyper
yeah.
combo that is trying to turn 1 you.
Dave is on the play. He kept a 6-card hand, but leads off on turn 1 Deathrite Shaman. That will get met by a Lightning Bolt from Bob.
Bob cannot get that out of there fast enough. Again, like we talked about Nile Spellbomb, Deathrite Shaman is obviously good against a deck that's trying to cast a bunch of Treasure Cruises, but it's not insane. There are going to be turns where you don't use it.
Yeah, maybe a missed opportunity here for Bob. Dave played a Baleful Strix on turn 2. Bob let out the game on Basic Mountain when he did have the option to play Volcanic Island. Left with a Daze in his hand. Maybe would have wanted to Daze the Strix. I'm not sure, though. It would have set him a ways back.
Yeah. It sets him a land back, but this is, again, not a deck that actually needs a bunch of land in play. I'm inclined to agree. I think that was an actual blunder there. Making sure that you can keep your land in play. Of course, he's also playing around Wasteland by doing that, which is a concern. But he had the backup land anyway.
These Shardless decks, though, are not always that heavy on Wastelands. Sometimes it's only 2 copies.
As is the case for Dave.
Yeah. Dave's going to go for a Tarmogoyf here. Didn't play a land beforehand, though, and it's going to get dazed. Played Creeping Tar Pit, and Bob will use a second Lightning Bolt, this time on Baleful Strix.
Fortunately for Bob, is going to get a chance to get maximal value out of that daze. And in fact, it works out even better for him because he can daze Tarmogoyf and bolt the Strix, but he cannot daze the Strix and bolt the Tarmogoyf.
And things running well for Bob right now. Blind flip to the Delver off Brainstorm. It's going to swing in, putting Dave down to 17, and another Delver committed to the board for Bob.
So Insectile Aberration out to play. We've seen a lot of Delver Secrets in this match. That's a card we knew was good. That's a threat we knew was scary.
Shardless Agent for Shields. It's going to cascade into Tarmogoyf, and Shields has reloaded on the board.
We've also seen a lot of Shardless Agent into Tarmogoyf this match.
That is the 3rd time.
Yeah.
Actually, Dave is 3 for 3 on cascading into Tarmogoyf.
Speaking of threats we knew were scary.
Yeah, 5 power on Shields' side. Bob, even if he hits the flip, only gets 6. We may see an upkeep Brainstorm here to ensure the Delver flip. Bob's pausing there to see if he wants to do it.
Yeah, and the question here is, do you absolutely have to start cracking in for 6 in order to close this game out? And I am inclined to say you do.
Looks like he agrees here. He's going to go for the Brainstorm. Dave is debating on a Force of Will to it.
Yeah, and if I'm Shields, I think I want to do that, actually.
Yeah, Forked Bolt among the cards that Bob drew there. Forked Bolt and Ponder.
Okay, Fork Bolts it does not actually change the clock if one of the Insectile Aberrations dies. So
Still, it's 3 turns both ways.
yeah.
So he's going to flip off Ponder. Now 2 Insectile Aberrations in play. And he'll crack Scalding Tarn. Of note, to make Treasure Cruise good, Bob in his 17-land deck has decided to run 10 fetch lands and only 7 fetchable lands.
Yeah, sure. That is actually, back when I was playing Blue-Red Delver, that's the same configuration. I had 10 and 8.
Okay,
Yeah.
so still the same numbers.
10 fetches, 4 Volcanic, 2 Island, 2 Mountain.
Basic Island is fetched for here. Bob now up to 5 cards in his graveyard. He is sitting on a Treasure Cruise, so getting close to that point again where he just gets to Ancestral Recall.
And one of his lands, of course, an actual mountain, so can't ponder to get it to be cheaper and then go crazy with it.
His Ponder does hit some pretty good cards. It's Brainstorm, Daze.
Those are good cards. Those are not necessarily the cards you want right now. Again, Bob, he has the Treasure Cruise. He's very close to pulling the trigger on it. As powerful a card as Brainstorm is, when you're about to draw 3 anyway, I think I would rather just shuffle these along and look for burn.
I actually like what he's kept here. So there's an observation. Shields missed a land drop on that last turn.
Okay.
So keeping Daze, there's a reasonable chance that this Daze is live.
Yeah,
if
okay.
you're Bob Huang. Dave took 6 that turn, dropped to 11. It's now So now we'll see him crack back. He's on the wrong side of the race, though, and is going to have to do something to catch up. Another Shardless Agent and a Force of Will in his hand. We'll see how he decides to move forward.
Yeah, Shiels holding on to that Force of Will. Of course, he wants to develop his board as well. So now he has the tension, well, do I play my blue card and potentially be stranded with this Force of Will?
Yeah. He does have a third blue card. I believe he has an Ancestral Visions as well. That card, if he does have it, it's not good for anything other than Force of Will fodder.
Sure, and I love getting to see Ancestral Visions versus Treasure Cruise.
The Treasure Cruise does seem a lot better right now.
It's looking quite a bit better, yeah.
Now, to be fair, Shiels' deck can cascade into his Ancestral Visions, so it may be a deck-dependent thing here.
Sure, and both cards cost 1 in their own way.
Yeah.
They just simply require different hoops to be jumped through. The question really is, which hoop is more troublesome? Having Shardless Agent in your deck, Shardless Agent not a bad card at all, or having a bunch of cantrips and playing maybe more fetch lands than usual. Again, these are not bad cards.
No, completely agree. We'll see the line Dave goes with. I feel like he's going to end up casting a Shardless Agent. I don't know what other lines he has. He has a Disfigure for the turn.
Yeah, and that's...
So that's pretty big. He can't cast Shardless and Disfigure.
And I think it is worth more to him to hold up that Disfigure. The Disfigure cuts Bob's clock down from 2 turns to 4. Now, actually, if one Delver is removed immediately and the other Insectile Aberration, gets through, now that Fork Bolt actually does start to change the clock.
Disfigure gets rid of one of the Insectile Aberrations. Bob has the option of dazing it simply to put a card in the graveyard. He's not going to do it, though. Delver will join the yard, and that's actually the 7th card in the graveyard. So Treasure Hunt has achieved Ancestral Recall status here.
Yeah, the difference between card number 7 and card number 8, more or less nothing.
There may even, I believe by casting that, he's going to get all the lands out of the graveyard. So he's actually going to shrink Tarmogoyf, too.
That's an adorable interaction.
There is the Treasure Cruise cast again on Bob Huang's side. Remember, he has a full play set of these.
Yeah, and we are now doing the mass Tarmogoyf recalculation.
We're down to a 3-4. You think this will get a Force of Will?
It has to. This is certainly worth fighting over. Dave doesn't currently have an answer to the 1 Insectile Aberration. Falling to 8 against a deck that he has seen to have quite a bit of burn. He is scary enough as it is. Bob's got plenty of cards in hand already. Drawing 3 more all but guarantees, I would feel, that you are going to get long-ranged.
3 cards, Shardless Agent, Force of Will. So Force of Will pitching that Ancestral Visions is going to counter Treasure Cruise. Bob can brainstorm here if he wants to try to find something. Maybe he finds a Force, maybe he finds a... No number of dazes will take care of this.
No. Would need 3 and would also need that mountain to be an island that can be bounced. I'm inclined to cast Brainstorm here just because I think Bob wants to cast Brainstorm anyway.
If he's boarded in his Pyroblasts, he has 3 in his board,
Sure.
Then he has something to brainstorm too.
Okay. And Pyroblast, again, there were not a lot of wiggle room, I don't think. And Pyroblast is not that exciting here. I think the cards you're actually wanting to fight over are the Tarmogoyfs, which stop your ground assault.
Yeah.
So I would not be inclined to bring in Pyroblast in this matchup if I were Bob.
Interesting. Bob's going to go ahead and main phase Brainstorm right after that Treasure Cruise. He does see a Monastery Swift Spear here.
Okay.
That should be able, could be able to get him an extra turn here. If he plays it, well, that'll at least swing in for 1. We'll see how he wants to proceed from that point.
Yeah.
It's interesting. A lot of decisions here.
And you mentioned that Bob cast the Brainstorm after the Treasure Cruise has been countered.
Mm-hmm.
What that tells me is that Bob has boarded out his Force of Wills.
Yeah.
We brought up Pyroblast. That's probably not a card that would be in the first place.
Do you think he has neither in his deck? There's nothing to brainstorm into.
Yeah, there was just not anything to find that could stop it. And Shiels would certainly pick up on that, I think. Honestly, I think that's a very minor misstep in that it's worth representing that you have Force of Will still in your deck.
Tough decision here from Bob. He knows he wants to have Monastery Swift Spear. It looks like he wants that 4th land to reshuffle. He hasn't decided whether or not he wants to have Daze or Brainstorm in his hand. Which one to keep, which one to shuffle away.
And Shiels still missed his 4th land, so Bob has to assign some value to that Daze.
Yeah, here comes Swift Spear. Charlotte's Agent won't do anything about that. This is going to be an attack for 4. And I actually think Bob's going to go ahead and redraw all his cantrips. He set it up so that next turn he can draw his Brainstorm into the Forked Bolt, cast both of them, and have a pretty sizable attack from that Monastery Swift Spear.
Yeah, that would make a 4/5, I believe.
Or 3/4 at the very least.
Oh, it's cantrip into Fork Bolt, not a cantrip into cantrip into Fork Bolt. Okay.
I mean, it's Brainstorm. It
Sure.
could definitely be cantrip into Forked Bolt.
Could get large.
Dave did not draw a land, so it does not look like his spells here will be daze proof, and that could prove to be a big deal here.
The upside, of course, the Shardless Agent that you actually are daze proof in a sense, just because you're presenting multiple spells on the stack at the same time.
One of them will resolve. He has Brainstorm as the card to cascade into. There is a daze in Bob's hand. Imagine it'll take care of one of these 2 spells.
Yeah, and I'm very intrigued to find out which, actually.
Well, I would guess the Brainstorm if I were Bob here, because Shardless Agent I don't think is going to win the race against you by itself. You can swing Delver for 3, probably chump the Tarmogoyf unless Dave has an untapped land, and then swing it again for 3. So there's...
I suppose the presence of Tarmogoyf doesn't actually... It makes it so that having additional material on the board doesn't make Monastery Swift Spear any worse, because it already is not getting through Tarmogoyf.
It's already not getting through.
Yeah, I feel like if Dave doesn't get to keep the second Shardless Agent, then he can't afford to attack with Tarmogoyf. Whereas if he gets both, then I think maybe he can go on the offensive.
Well, he can go on the offensive with both creatures here. And they're both going to get in there. It puts Bob down to 6.
Okay, so...
Danger here is that Bob can now Forked Bolt. Bob has him dead. He can Brainstorm into Forked Bolt, Forked Bolt to the Shardless Agent, and then swing for 6.
Yeah, and I think that was... That was what I was getting at, that I am not comfortable attacking with Tarmogoyf here unless I have multiple layers of insurance against an attacker.
See, Dave has 1 card left. We believe he is dead here. We'll see if Bob executes it that way. And with the speed, he knows.
Yeah.
He knows he has it. He's going to Brainstorm here.
He's on
that
plan
pumps
A.
Swift Spear.
And I caught a glimpse of a Tarmogoyf in Dave's hand, so that is not going to give him any insurance here. And hey, there's a Blood Moon.
There's a Blood Moon. That's not going to matter, but the Forked Bolt sure is. And Bob's got to, he just has it. We'll see if he makes sure he goes through.
Yeah, has to work through the permutations. Would something like, Daze doesn't do it, Forcible doesn't do it because there's only 1 card. It's worth the time to slow down and just make sure that you're killing them actually kills them.
And there you go, Forked Bolt on Shardless Agent. That's going to pump the Swift Spear to a 3-power creature. It and Delver will deal 6 damage, and Bob Huang, with his blue-red Delver deck, moves to 7-1, defeating Dave Shiels.
Does a little celebration dance. Well, a well-earned one as well. Yeah, and that deck...